with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent, you won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.
Hello and welcome to the Belfast Bapcast. We have back on this evening with us allegedly Dave, so we are just picking up on a conversation we had started the last time. It was about 2 weeks back. So Dave, welcome back to the Bapcast.
I'm glad to be back. Sorry about last week.
Not a problem. And how has your house move went then? All good?
All good, all good. We're just, getting acclimatized to the place. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, happy days. And nice Christmas, etc.
Well, we don't really celebrate the pagan winter satanic festival, so yeah, had some good days.
Yeah, I didn't have a tree up either, so you're not alone.
Tree?
Yeah. So we had left off the last time just about how we create different dimensions, etc. So if you just want to sort of pick up where you left off.
Right, I think we covered that in a bit that didn't work out. So I was actually going to go into my research in how this universe was created and our place in it. So what I discovered, which is probably not a discovery to a lot of people, but the blueprint for this universe is actually the flower of life. I always thought of it as a pretty pattern, that seems to be, a pop up every so often. But I never gave it any significance. But then I started to think about how a singular being who is all there is would contemplate its own existence, because a singular being that is all there is, that's the only thing it can contemplate, because it's got nothing else to compare with. Yeah. So the singular being that is all there is, we might call him, God, or the creator, or I call him the Most High. So this singular being exists in a void, because there is nothing, literally nothing else to compare himself with. So he is the void, but that void is infinite possibility, infinite potential, right? So infinite energy, infinite potential, because that void is literally mind. Yeah, this self-awareness. Okay, so this singular being could symbolize himself in this process of exploring existence. He could symbolize himself as a point. Now that point being everything there is, right? But he can simulate himself as a point. So the most interesting concept for this being to contemplate would be something other than him, another point. Okay. And that point would necessarily have to be a distance away. So now the Most High has created the first dimension. So distance, yeah. So that line, yeah. So that point is a distance away. So first dimension, right? But that point could be, well, here at that same distance away, or there at that distance, and an infinite number of points, as long as it's that distance away, right? An infinite number of points and different places it could be, which is a circle.
Yeah.
So now we've got a point in a circle, right? And another point on some point on that circle. Well, the next interesting concept, right, would be, what would I look like from the perspective of the other, which is another circle. So now you've got two interlocking circles with this new shape in the middle called the Vesica Pisces. Okay. Now, I don't want to go too far into it because without visuals, it's very difficult to follow. But I will say that in that shape, these two interlocking circles, a strange number pops out. Right, so the number is 1.618 or 0.618. Okay, and the meaning of that number is that essentially everything in this world conforms to this ratio 1 to 1.618. So my arm, for instance, if this part of my arm is 1, right, this part is 1.618. Yeah, so the way your face is structured is 1 to 1.618 everywhere. Okay, and the closer you are to that ratio, the more beautiful you are. And the
That must
further
be pretty far.
That's for me too. But yeah, the further away you get to, the closer you get to it, the more beautiful. Further away you depart from it, the more less attractive you are. And that goes for everything. So buildings in the past used to conform to that 1 to 1.618, and they were beautiful. And now we've got these slab buildings that conform to whatever, the designer feels he wants, and they look ugly. Yeah,
They do. Yeah.
So there is just that number encoded in these circles, these two circles, is essentially the blueprint for the structure of everything. So now you've got these two circles interlocking. There are new points that are created. So where the two circles meet, sort of top and bottom, new points. So now you can draw more circles, and now that generates other points to the point where you get one circle surrounded by 6 circles. That's called the seed of life. Now, it turns out that every cell, every egg follows that progression from a point, to an egg, as it were, right? Then it sort of divides. So you got the two interlocking circles, and then more cells arrive, and it follows that pattern. And to get to that pattern of a circle with 6 circles around it, 7 steps. It's the 7 days of creation. Okay, so literally life follows that pattern. Okay, and if you continue drawing circles, you end up with this flower of life. Okay, now in the flower of life is all 2-dimensional geometry. So you can draw lines, between these points, and you'll get the equilateral triangle, you'll get hexagrams, pentagrams, So all 2-dimensional geometry is encoded in that symbol. But along with that is 3-dimensional geometry. So where you've got the equilateral triangle, you just happen to have a point right in the center, which if you start drawing lines to that point, now it seems like it pops out at you.
Yeah.
Right. So now it creates this idea of a 3rd dimension. And with all the other shapes, same thing. It shows you that there's another dimension that pops out towards you. So now you created the 3rd dimension. And let's go back to the maths involved here. Yeah, we've already mentioned 1.618, but also encoded in this is a sequence of numbers. Okay. Again, it's very hard to describe this without having visuals, but you're going to have to do the best you can. So there's a sequence of numbers that come out of this shape, which is, essentially the next number is the previous 2 numbers added together. Okay, which is the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah.
And again, encoded in this shape. Now the Fibonacci sequence, first of all, it's the true number sequence of this universe. We've got the human one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a human sequence. the true sequence of this universe is this Fibonacci sequence, right? Because let's say all trees, as they grow, the branches appear in the sequence, the Fibonacci sequence. Everything that grows tends to follow this Fibonacci sequence. Even time follows the Fibonacci sequence, which is kind of obvious, really, because the future equals the present plus the past. Yeah. So that's how time unfolds. And that might sound like a silly explanation for time, but it turns out that there's trading software, sort of trading prediction software, that basically follows the Fibonacci sequence. And so trading patterns follow the sequence as well. So if say you've got a period of try and figure a Fibonacci number, say 55 days, okay, certain events will happen in that period, okay, rises and falls and dips and whatever, okay. In the next Fibonacci number, so the next period of, and I can't remember what the next Fibonacci number is now, but in that next period, which is a longer period, the same events will happen, but stretched out over a longer period. And then the next period, an even bigger period, the same events, but stretched out, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah. So time is cyclical and follows the Fibonacci sequence. So literally,
Does it go back on itself?
Sorry?
So will it go in like a cycle? So get to a certain where it's like spaced out. You said it starts at 55, and then a larger number, and the events are the same but spaced out. Does it start retracting back, or does it just go indefinitely?
Well, funny you should say that, because there was a guy called Terence McKenna. I don't know if you come across
Yes,
him.
DMT man. Yes.
Yes, he put forward this idea called time wave zero, and he actually worked backwards using the same thought that you had there, and he came up with so if you went working backwards from the beginning of time, right, it ends up at December 21st, 2012.
Winter solstice.
So it's called time wave zero.
Okay.
And I believe that he was right to an extent, that something happened at that time, and it's also where the Mayan calendar ended as well. And the Mayan calendar was also cyclical and based on the Fibonacci sequence. So yes, it does work backwards. Terence McKenna worked it out. I don't quite understand it myself, like where we go from that point. The Mayan calendar basically says that we are in the time of no time right now, which is interesting because somebody else put this forward, that I think for us time ended in 1999, because nothing new has happened since then. Okay, so you could look at a picture of somebody from the 1940s, and you'll be able to go, yeah, that's from the 1940s. Look at that car. Look at how they're dressed. Look at their hairstyles. Yeah, it's a unique look of 1940. Same with 1950. Same with 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990. But think about the 2000s.
It's been kind of homogenous. It's just been, yeah.
All cars look the same. There's been nothing new.
Slightly more rounded or slightly tweak of the design, but it all sort of, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because, the same thing was said in the Matrix film, that Agent Smith said, this is the world of 1999. Yeah. And this was the peak of your civilization. And basically saying that we've kept it at 1999 for over 100 years. Yeah. So perhaps Terence McKenna is right and the Mayan calendar is right. We are in the time of no time. And, everyone is now feeling that time is speeding up. it's not
Yeah.
it's not working the same way. And I think there's some evidence to back that up, where people are looking at old analog watches and stuff that they've had in a drawer, and finding that it's not saying the same time as all the digital watches and digital dates and times that are around us. So something's going on. Perhaps we are in a time of no time, and time wave zero has reached us. Well,
There's been a couple of theories that, like with the blocking out of the sun and a new sun going into the sky and different things I've heard. And I mean, it's theory. It's only ever going to be theory unless you can do a test to test it yourself. It's the same as relying on a NASA picture to say we've been to the moon. You just have to either take their word for it or do your own research.
indeed, and that is kind of hits the nail on the head, because we've been born into this world, and I personally think that as children, we literally know everything. We come into this world with a complete command of our intuition, knowing whatever we want to know. But we have that educated out of us, and we're told this is the world. Accept it, accept it as it is. Right? And don't trust your intuition. That's you just dreaming stuff up.
So I feel, especially with ancient texts and stuff like the Bible, etc., there's definitely been bastardization to take away abilities, and the fact that we've got a bit of rubber soul between our souls and the earth, and everything that disconnects us from what we are supposed to be, essentially, which is not just two-dimensional beings. There's higher dimensions.
Sure. I mean, okay. To my mind, there are two ways of knowing something. Okay, one's a real way and one's the artificial way. So the artificial way is that you get 3 facts, okay, and then you get a story to link them together, and now you know something, right? But this is the logical left brain way of thinking. Yeah. The problem with that is that you could tell a different story to link them together, and now you've got a different knowing. Yeah, you've got an infinite number of stories you can tell about those 3 facts and give you a different knowing. The real way of knowing something is knowing without knowing how you know it,
and also knowing that you know nothing.
That's true, but that I think is a kind of a get out by the system, right? Saying that you know nothing. No, you have access to everything, right? It's not the case you know nothing. You've got access to everything. So that leads us into the 4th dimension, actually. All right.
Good. Nice segue.
Nice segue, yeah. So it's obviously difficult to figure out what the 4th dimension is, because we're 3-dimensional beings. So the way to figure it out, that I found, is to go down the dimensions we know and then go back up and extrapolate what the 4th dimension is. And then we can even extrapolate what the 5th dimension is. Okay. Right. So imagine I've got a cube in front of me. Okay. And I take that cube and I cut it in half and look at its cross section where I've cut. Yeah. Now I'm looking at a flat plane, a square. Okay. If I take that flat plane and cut it in half and look at its cross section, now I'm looking at a line. Okay. So if I take that line, cut it in half and look at its cross section, now I'm looking at a point.
She brought it right back almost.
Right. So I've gone down from 3 dimensions down to 0 dimensions. Okay. But it means, though, if we go back up, a line is an infinite number of points all merged together into one thing, going off in a direction. Okay. A flat plane is an infinite number of lines all merged together into one thing, going off in a different direction, 90 degrees away from the first direction. Okay.
Yeah.
A cube is an infinite number of flat planes, all merge together into one thing, going off in a different direction, right, from the other two, 90 degrees away from the other two. So necessarily, the fourth dimension must be an infinite number of cubes going off in another direction, totally different from the other two. What do you reckon that direction is?
You've lost me, so go ahead.
Time. Okay, because this key didn't start off as a key. At one point, it was something else, and it eventually ended up as a key. And later on in the future, it's going to be something else. Okay, so the good example that I use is imagine a wooden chair. Okay,
Yeah.
that wooden chair is a three-dimensional slice of a fourth-dimensional object, right? And we're interacting with it because we're on the third dimension here. We're interacting with slices of that chair, right? Three-dimensional slices. So what does a fourth-dimensional wooden chair look like? So imagine this, okay? There's a flash of light. Maybe it came from the sun, right? And that light gets absorbed by a leaf. And that leaf helps a tree to grow, right? And eventually somebody cuts down that tree, right? And it's sitting as lumber now. And eventually somebody has an idea to make a chair. So they take that lumber, turn it into a chair. And that's when we interact with it, yeah? Slices of that object, yeah?
Yeah.
Later on, that chair might break, right? And end up in a landfill, right? Where over time, that wood breaks down into a liquid. And that liquid eventually breaks down to a gas. And maybe that gas will ignite and become a flash of light again, yeah?
So would the fourth dimension only apply to organisms?
No, it applies to everything, right? Because everything isn't a thing, it's a process. Right? So that whole process is that fourth dimensional chair, okay? But in the fourth dimension, that whole process is all together, all happening at once in one place, okay?
Okay.
Very difficult for us three-dimensional beings to get our heads around that.
Even though the direction is time, time is not really an object in the fourth dimension.
It is. Let's call time changeability. Yeah.
Okay.
So as I said, the whole of reality works that way. So think of reality like a 3D film strip. Yeah. So there isn't all this motion or changeability. What it is static frames of reality, just like a 3D diorama. Yeah. So a static frame for one moment, right? And then the next moment you get almost exactly the same static frame, but slightly tweaked, just a tiny bit. And then you get the next frame, which is again slightly tweaked, and so on. And they're going by so quickly that we see it as smooth movement. So literally every moment is like 10 to the minus 44 seconds.
With that knowledge, then are you able to mess with reality? So the likes of like the Mandela effect, for example.
There you go. Because here's the thing: there's also the observer effect. Right now, this we're not separate from this because everything here is the product of one consciousness. As I said, that process of creation, and which is symbolized by the flower of life, is the Most High contemplating himself, contemplating existence, which yet ends up as a creation of a universe, which this is it. There isn't space and other planets and whatever out there. This is the universe. Okay, it ended up in the creation of this place, right? And the spawning of us down here to experience this place, to experience existence. Okay.
What dimension would the likes of spirits and things like that fall under?
Likes of what?
Like spiritual beings, if you believe in them, like what dimension would they fall into?
This is a difficult one because again we don't really understand how this works, but I would actually say they would be on a dimension of like, let's say 3.5 or something. Because why I say that is because you can enter the fourth dimension, right? And there are ways you enter the fourth dimension. We all do it. But there are artificial ways of entering the fourth dimension using drugs, drink, certain spiritual practices that will get you there, okay?
Like astral projection, stuff like that.
Yes. The thing is, if you go in naturally, you go into this space, this fourth dimension, right, with full control, with full command, okay? And that you're the only one there.
Would it
But
be
if
like
you
a
go in
creator?
artificially, sorry?
Would it be like for us almost like a dimension for creation where we can create and interact with the other dimensions?
Yeah, you're going way ahead. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
But yes, so when you go in naturally, you're there on your own, okay? When you go in by artificial means, you now encounter other entities, and the Old Testament tells you who those entities are. They're the Nephilim spirits, okay? And they don't have your best interests at heart. Let's put it that way. Okay. No. So we inhabit two different dimensions simultaneously, okay? But our focus can only be on one at a time, right? So right now, you're in the third dimension. You're focused on the third dimension, right? You're looking at me and I'm looking at you. We're focused where we are now, okay?
Yep.
Here and now. But at any time, you can shift your focus to the fourth dimension. How do you do that? Well, you might get to a point where I'm droning on and you're going, oh, well, bloody hell, wish you'd shut up. And you'd be staring out the window, right, thinking of something else. You're now in the fourth dimension. Your focus has shifted into the fourth dimension, right? Just think of a time when you're imagining something, right? Let's say you were designing something in your head, right? You might be kind of looking up at the ceiling, right? But even though your eyes are pointing towards the ceiling, are you seeing the ceiling?
No.
No, you're seeing what you're imagining.
Well, it's like manifesting, almost like what you're.
Well, yes. So your physical eyes are now suppressed. So same with your hearing, because when you're in that state of imagining, somebody could
Dave,
yeah, and you won't hear them, right? You don't feel anything that's going on. You don't feel, when you're really in that state, you don't feel cold. You don't feel, because you're focused there. Yeah, you're using other senses, spiritual senses, as it were, to get non-local data, right? Because you're not focused in this place where there is a here and now. You're in this other place where there is no time, there is no space. Okay?
And when you're in that place, things can almost like download into your brain in a hole.
Exactly, because think of let's go back down to one dimension. In the third dimension, we could look down on a two-dimensional table or a two-dimensional world, right? And we can see everything in that two-dimensional world. If there were two-dimensional creatures, roaming around that world, not only could we see the creatures, but we could see inside those creatures, right? We can have an overview of the dimension below, a full overview where we know everything about that dimension. Take it up to the next dimension, right? The whole, what's available is the whole of time and space all together in one place, all happening all at once. And when you're in that dimension, you've got an overview of the whole of time and space all happening all at once. Yeah.
So it is making a lot of sense to me now. It wasn't for a while, but it's making a lot of sense now. Right.
So it's also like one of those rewritable CDs. Remember those?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I'm not old enough, but I was told about them.
Well, the thing is, you've got read access and write access. Okay.
Yeah.
So reading, obviously, you've got the whole of time and space. You've got access to all the information that ever was, ever is, and ever will be. Yeah, you've got access to all that information. You know, where did I leave my keys? You can draw it down and find out where you left your keys, or you know what was your favorite food in the Elizabethan times. You've got access to that. Okay, you've also got right access. So you can create something, right? As soon as you conceive of something, now there's a probability of that thing existing in the future. So now it exists the moment you think of it. Now I had an experience of that. Now I mentioned last time that I don't know how. Well, drugs don't really work on me, right? And but cannabis does. And so I had these cannabis journeys.
Yeah, you were saying, yeah.
And so one of these cannabis journeys showed me what it's like to live in that state where as soon as you conceive of something, it exists, right? So what happened was I took some cannabis and I could hear every single conversation in the room all at once, the whole thing. You know, I knew what everyone was saying. I was like, wow. And as soon as I thought, wow, I thought, I wonder if everybody's doing this. And the moment I had that thought flit across my head, I had the answer. Yes, they are. Yeah. I had the reason why, you know, we don't know that we're doing that. I had an experiment that I could do to prove that that's what's going on. I had the results of that experiment. I had the implications of those results. I had a whole talk that I could give about that whole experiment. I had the whole thing instantly as soon as that idea went across my head. The whole thing in a neat package, all tied up with a bow, just delivered straight away. Okay, and that's literally what it's like for the Most High, and also for us, because on a sort of one step back, as soon as we conceive of something, now it exists. The whole thing exists in the future, and it's a probability of it existing, right? The more you think about it, the more you concentrate on it, the higher the probability gets, until eventually it's right in front of you. Yeah.
So obviously the obvious question remaining then would be, when you have like acknowledged the fourth dimension, you understand it, then what is the fifth? Looking down on the fourth.
Right. So when I
I'm not going to keep just asking what's the sixth, what's the seventh. I'm intrigued. What's
no. So when I first gave the talk, I would say that I've no idea what the fifth dimension could be. Yeah. But somebody came back to me and said, why don't you apply the same logic that you applied for the fourth? So I did, and I thought, oh, it's obvious. Okay. So remember, the fourth dimension is an infinite number of cubes, all merged together into one thing, going off in the direction of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fifth dimension must be an infinite number of those, things, which is the whole of time space, all happening all at once. An infinite number of those, right, all merged together into one thing, going off in the direction of probability. So every possible permutation is played out in a completely different universe. So
I have hair in another universe with...
Yes.
Yeah.
Or, in another universe, you had a banana instead of a bowl of cereal this morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so time unfolds slightly differently in that universe.
So do you feel that the fifth dimension and the fourth, well, obviously, are all always ongoing at any given time?
Again, every dimension is happening simultaneously. Just like as soon as the Most High conceives of the idea, it already exists. Okay.
And are they fucking with that with CERN, do you think?
I believe so. I believe they're opening dimension 3.5. I was mentioning what that is.
Tearing the veil, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
So these entities exist in kind of the fourth dimension, but in a lower level of it. That when we go into the fourth dimension, we are at a level that they can't attach to us, or they can't reveal themselves to us, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're in the kind of, this is the way I conceive of it. They're in a lower sort of sub-level of the fourth dimension. But I think, CERN is trying to rip a hole into that dimension to let these things back in. Right. But I was going somewhere before you asked that. I can't remember where I was going with that. Yeah.
So you were saying it was an infinite number of possibilities. So in another universe.
Right, yes. So I believe that there is one prime universe, right? One prime universe we're inhabiting, okay? But there's an infinite number of unrendered universes, right? Information, I call them time-space event stacks. So stacks of information that describe a universe, but it hasn't been rendered, okay?
It's almost like every possible outcome.
Every possible outcome of everything, right? It goes on infinitely, right? But there's only one prime universe and all these infinite number of permutations, okay? And so to give the example, I think we mentioned it last time about car parking space and manifesting a parking space.
Yeah.
So to modify what I was saying last time, when you choose that parking space that you want, right? What happens is, and you're not doing it consciously, but what happens is we've got the prime universe, and in that prime universe, you don't end up with that parking space, right? Because I've skipped a lot of stuff, but let me go back a bit. In the 3D world, it's deterministic. You can't change anything, okay? Because you have, your personality can be reduced to numbers, so that I know I can give you a stimulus and I can predict the result, okay? So I can take that personality profile, give you a stimulus, and I can predict what the result's going to be, with probabilistic kind of accuracy, okay? So your life is mapped out in the third dimension in probabilities. So there's a probable life path for you already set. There's nothing you can do about it, yeah? But when you go into the fourth dimension, you can change it. It's very much like, if you think of the whole of time and space like a kaleidoscope, yeah? When you look in that kaleidoscope, you see this infinite pattern, yeah? That the further out you look, the more complicated it gets, okay? Yeah. But that there's a little segment where all the colors and the bits and pieces are in, and then there's an arrangement of mirrors that just reflect reflections, of which reflect reflections, etc., etc. Yeah. The 3D world is the reflections. You can't change that, because it's like trying to fix your hair by messing around with a mirror. Yeah, you can't change anything. Yeah. You can only change things in the pattern, in the fourth dimension. And you can access the fourth dimension with your right brain when you imagine, when you design something, when you create something with your mind. Okay.
So the big pharma, the medication they put people on for mental health issues generally shuts down the prefrontal cortex. So is that like access to the right brain as well? It's not going to be as
well. You'll find that there's a lot of things in our world that just shut you off from the right brain. Education, for one thing. Back when I was at school, there was I'd do drama, yeah, or art, or woodwork, or metalwork, or those things that would stimulate your creative abilities. Yeah, they're not doing that anymore. They're doing left brain academic subjects now. Yeah, and even when they do you know, anything that seems right-brained, well, it's not.
It's framed within a frame context. They're only allowed to sort of be creative to a point. Yeah.
It achieves the same result, but different methods. Like like painting a picture of something and painting by numbers. Yeah. So painting a picture of something, right? You're using your creative faculties. Yeah. When you're painting by numbers, you're using left brain, where you're going, okay, that's number 4, so that means blue. So I've got to paint blue in here. There's no creativity there, but it achieves the same result. Yeah, you see what I mean? Right. So literally, the education system locks you into your left brain. Yeah. The language we use locks us into the left brain. You know, the drugs that they've been giving us. Right. And if you listen to Rudolf Steiner, for instance, he literally says a way of a vaccine will eventually be found that will lock people away from the spiritual side of life. So they only think that the everything they perceive with their senses is the only thing there is.
What a sad existence that would be. What a sad existence that would be.
Well, that's most people's existence in this world today. Yeah. Because it's been a war on our right brain, essentially.
And do you think the pineal gland is anything to do with that?
I think it might be, you know, I know you've got the corpus callosum, which is a link between the left and right, but I think there's something the pineal is bringing to the picture, because again, there's a war on the pineal gland as well. You know, the fluoride in the water is there mostly to
calcify.
But they want us locked in the left brain, because again, remember with the logical way of knowing something, because that happens here, and so they can change that story whenever they want.
The spiritual beings that are in 3.5 dimensions, 3.5, would that be due to us being made in the image of God, therefore being able to get into that creator dimension, as opposed to?
Well, I think that Adam, right, is said that he was given the likeness of the Most High. Well, the Most High isn't, doesn't have arms and legs. It's not about physical likeness. I think we were given his mind, right, his creative mind. Okay, because Adam is a co-creator here, and it's more than just making the flowers or whatever, right? And this is I think I've skipped a load of stuff that I was going to explain, but it's gone now. But this leads us on to what we're here to do, what we're doing. Okay, so Adam has said he's not here just to create the flowers or create, pretty pictures or whatever. I have to introduce a new topic, a new idea. It's called the causal loop, right?
Okay.
Have you come across that, a causal loop?
No.
Right, so if you watch the film Star Trek: The Voyage Home, have you ever seen that one?
No, I wouldn't be a Trekkie,
Right. Well, if you know the old characters from Star Trek, Scotty the engineer, and the gang, they end up doing a bit of time travel, and they end up back in 1986. Okay, and to complete their mission, they need something called transparent aluminium, right, which doesn't exist in 1986. Okay. Now, Scotty learned the formula for transparent aluminium when he went to school. He learned it from a textbook because somebody invented it before. Yeah. So to get this transparent aluminium in 1986, Scotty teaches it to an engineer in 86. Bones stops him and says, "Hang on a minute, aren't we changing the timeline?" And Scotty turns around and says, "Well, how do we know that this guy didn't invent it?" They went, "Oh, okay." So think about it. Scotty teaches this guy the formula for transparent aluminium, right? So now this guy invents it, puts it in a textbook so that Scotty can learn it in the future, yeah, then take it into the past and give it back to the engineer so he can invent it, and so on. Where did the information come from? Right? The information doesn't have a beginning or end. It was always there, right? That's called a causal loop.
Okay.
Right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So, so this also leads into the fifth dimension. Okay. So the proof of this idea that the fifth dimension is probability, yeah, is essentially how light works. Okay. So imagine you're at the beach. You're at the beach and your friend is swimming in the water kind of diagonally away from you. Yeah. You look over and you see your friend is struggling. So you might think the quickest way to get to your friend is a straight line from where you are to your friend. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it turns out it's not the most efficient way of getting there, because you can run faster on land than you can swim. Okay. So that straight line isn't the fastest way to get there. So you might think, if I run along the beach to the point where I have to swim the least, that would be the most efficient route. Well, no, because now it's much further to go. Yeah. The most efficient route is somewhere in between. Okay. Now, what you would do naturally, without even thinking about which route shall I take, you will intuitively take that shortest route to get to your friend. Okay. Without even thinking. Okay. Well, it turns out that light does exactly the same thing. Richard Feynman, my favorite physicist, he was working on this problem, like, how does light choose that path of least action, as it's called? How does light choose that path? Well, Feynman said that light actually takes every single conceivable path, not only the ones that we think it might take that seem impossible, but all the way to Basildon and back, and it reaches its target. Right? It takes every conceivable path, but all the other paths cancel each other out, right? Leaving the path of least action. Okay, and there's an experiment that I show in the talk that actually proves that's exactly what happens. Light takes every conceivable path, even the ones that we would consider impossible. Right? This experiment shows that light bouncing in ways that it's impossible. Right? But literally, ordinarily, all these other impossible paths cancel each other out, leaving the one path. Okay. But it kind of leaves the question unanswered. How does light know which path not to cancel out? Okay.
Well, are we even able to conceive that?
Well, here's the thing. So I got the visuals from a video where somebody's explaining this thing, and I cut out the bits I wanted for my talk, but I never watched the whole video. So one day I actually sat and watched the whole video, and the rest of it was, the quest for these scientists and mathematicians to figure out why light is choosing that path. And it went through lots of different people, but eventually they figured it out. They figured out why light should always take the path of least action. But the thing is, as soon as we figured it out, that's the way light would always travel. It's a causal loop. Because we figured out that's the way light should travel.
That's how it travels.
That's the way it travels. Right? Because, again, in the fourth dimension, time isn't real. Right?
So that would bring us back to for a biblical statement, there's nothing new under the sun as such. Every possibility is here, and every possible thing has already been done.
Exactly. And, we're in this position, focuses on the third dimension, where we have to step through time, one moment at a time. But, everything has already happened. Every possible thing has already happened. Yeah. So, so going back to the car parking space, right? So deterministically in the third dimension, right? Without you asking for that space, you're going to get to Tesco's and somebody else is going to be there. But as soon as you ask for that space, what you're essentially doing subconsciously is finding the next universe where you end up in that space, okay? The closest one to this one, so the path of least action, yeah? And what that means is that part, that new future, should we say, had a divergent point from the one you're already on. So that divergent point might have been this morning when you chose a banana instead of cereal. Yeah. So
like the butterfly effect.
Yes. So when you chose to get that parking space, now your choice was the banana instead of the cereal, and now that leads you to that space. So you've essentially grabbed hold of a different universe, an unrendered universe, brought it into this one, and now that universe is rendered.
So there's people that do that without even comprehending that's what they're doing.
Without comprehending, all right? That now I believe the system has learned to create technology to mimic what we can do naturally.
At the heart of this big box is a tiny chip about the size of your thumbnail. And on this chip resides all of the wonder and magic that makes this thing go. I'm not going to describe in any mathematical detail how it all works, but let me give you an analogy. In quantum mechanics, there's this concept that a thing can exist in two states which are mutually exclusive at the same time. Imagine that there really are parallel universes out there, and now imagine you have two that are exactly identical in every respect, all the way out to the horizon as far as we can see, down to the last little atomic detail of every single thing, with only one difference. And that's the value of a little thing called a qubit on this chip, which is a contraction of quantum bit. And that qubit is very much like a bit or a transistor in a conventional computer. It has two distinct physical states, which we call 0 and 1 for bit. In a conventional computer, these are mutually exclusive. That device is either one or the other, and never anything else. In a quantum computer, that device can be in this strange situation where these two parallel universes have a nexus, a point in space where they overlap. And if we're smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect in our world.
Because when we do that, it's a natural process. We're meant to do that. It's a natural thing. So when time changes, because we're now, changing a divergent point between the two universes, when the time changes, the ripples are very, very tiny. So, if you have a banana or cereal, that doesn't really matter to the world.
So not even is time travel possible? It's essentially happening at all times.
It's always happening. And, you're doing it all the time without knowing, because we've been taught that that's impossible. Yeah.
And are we accessing the fifth dimension when we are going through like a choice that we're going to make and the possible outcomes of that?
Well, think of it this way, okay? Right now, if you imagine a continuum of dimensions, okay?
Yeah.
So we are in the third, right? So we're focused on the third. We've got an awareness of the fourth. Now that awareness has only been around for maybe a couple of 100 years. 300 years ago, farmers weren't thinking about time travel. Yeah.
No.
Right. So we've got an awareness of the fourth. We've got a dim awareness of the fifth. Because think about now, the multiverse has only been thought of in the last 40 or 50 years. Nobody was thinking about the multiverse before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got this dim awareness of the fifth. I believe what's happening, what we're actually doing, is very slowly moving up the dimensions. We're understanding fully what the third dimension is all about, just like we understood fully what the second dimension was all about, right? And as soon as we understand fully, we move up to the next dimension, right? And I believe not all of us move up to the next dimension, right? I think, if you're not a good player, right, you don't make it into the next dimension, right? So every dimensional shift we make, we lose souls who can't grasp
Access
it,
it.
can't act. They're not ready to move up to that next level. Okay, so eventually we are going to be focused on the fourth dimension, have an awareness of the fifth. Right, so we'll start to consciously manipulate the fifth and have a dim awareness of the sixth, and so on and so on. Okay, and eventually we'll get to, and I'm skipping ahead here.
That's fine. That's fine.
Eventually we'll get to infinite dimensions. Okay, I don't know how much time we've been going, but I want to
An
leave
hour
that.
nearly. Yeah.
I want to leave that bit to the end.
No worries.
Okay.
Well, we've been going an hour, so we'll go maybe an hour and a half. And
Okay, I'll leave that bit to the end. Just remember that we're if as a
in the
as a,
third, and understand
as
the
species,
fourth.
we're literally slowly moving up the dimensions. Okay, and we'll eventually get to infinite dimensions. Okay, right.
So, with
Mhm.
that in mind, if we're on this infinite, dimensional path, is there no end or no beginning?
Okay, yeah, okay, you're going right to the end now. So, okay, I might as well go as we'll see what happens afterwards. But okay, as I said, we're moving up these dimensions and we'll get to infinite dimensions. But if you think, as we move up these dimensions, our level of consciousness grows. Yeah. So, if you imagine we were two-dimensional beings, like we must have been at one point, two-dimensional beings. Well, you don't need a very high consciousness to navigate that world, right? When we moved up to the third dimension, literally the level of consciousness was an order of magnitude higher, because we had to now navigate a three-dimensional world, which came with all sorts of other issues. I think the lesson that needs to be learned in the third dimension is good and evil. Right? It's something that wasn't apparent in the two-dimensional world, right? and absolutely not an issue in the first dimensional world. Yeah, I think if you don't learn the lessons of good and evil, that's what determines whether you move up to the next dimension. And I think we've already had a glimpse of what that next dimension is like. Right? Have you ever seen the film Lucy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, she was a drug mule, and with a new sort of mind-expanding drug, and it exploded inside her, and she started in the film using more and more of her brain. Right. And when her mind got to 100%, she was able to teleport. Right. Now, think about this. The way they showed it in the film, I don't know if they did this intentionally, but instead of disappearing at one spot and appearing at another, she still had this metaphor of going in a straight line from one place to another. Yeah. If you remember the film, she was in a chair and she suddenly sort of shot forward and ended up, over the White Cliffs of Dover or something. Yeah. And then she shot forward and ended up in New York. Right? She didn't need to. She was still thinking three-dimensionally.
Yeah.
Right? Eventually, right? The idea is eventually, once her consciousness, grows in that dimension, she'd just be able to just disappear here and appear there. Right? She won't need the the three-dimensional movement thing. Yeah,
That would be problematic, wouldn't it?
not
In
necessarily.
a three-dimensional world, anyway. If people just started randomly randomly
Think about
appearing.
it though. Think about it though. It would be a problem to start with, right? But it's no longer the third dimension anymore, right? The third dimension in that world has already happened. Now you get to play in it. Now you get to choose how you want to live your life, or what life to live, or when you want to live your life, and doing it with the ability to teleport, or have mastery of space and time. Yeah, look, just like Lucy did when she mastered the teleportation bit. She started manipulating time. So she could go, and one bit they showed in the film was she appeared in front of some Red Indians, right? But they could see her, and she could interact with them, right? So she could just say, "Oh, I want to live in that time." So she'd appear there and now live a life in that time. Yeah, imagine that kind of existence. Again, we can't imagine it because our level of consciousness isn't there yet. But when we get to that dimension, first of all, we'll be like Lucy, thinking three-dimensionally, and then we'll get out of that thinking, start thinking fourth-dimensionally, and then we master that dimension, move up to the fifth dimension.
So what was once concept becomes tangible in the fourth?
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, I think eventually, as we move up, we lose souls, right, who can't make it in that dimension. And eventually we get to infinite dimensions, and there'll be one soul left. And that soul will give rise to the Most High, who will then create a universe so that he can explore existence and learn about existence so that he can create a universe and learn. It's a causal loop.
Yeah.
And we are the Most High, right? Trying to understand what it means to exist. Okay. So we are the Most High because we're a fragment of his consciousness, exploring this idea of living in this, in these dimensions, until we get to the point where we know everything about everything, and that's the Most High.
And the concept of that, so would your dimension and my dimension be two separate ones, even though we're both inhabiting the third and the fourth, or whatever you want to?
Well, essentially, no, we're all, we're existing in the third dimension because we're having this conversation, yeah?
Yeah.
But in reality, we're all in our own separate universes. Yeah, our universes can interact, overlap. But I'm in my own universe. You're in your own universe. Think of it like an online video game. Yeah, my computer is generating a universe for me to play in. Okay, there's nobody else there. There's nobody else. I'm the only player in that universe. Yeah, but you can play in the same game. And you can appear in my universe, and I will see you as a character, but I'm still in my own universe.
And would that be the reason why it's imperative to understand good and evil, so we're not interacting with others' universes negatively, and they're able to, because if you make the decision to pick up
well, again, we're looking,
for example, and stick it in somebody, you're very adversely affecting their reality. Yeah.
Well. If you think about it again, in terms of the path of least action, the most optimum path. Well, the most optimum path in life is good. Yeah, evil never really isn't really the an efficient way to live. Let's put it that way. All right. Cooperation and good are the best path, and that's part of what learning about existence is all about. The Most High isn't really concerned about good and evil as such, right? He's trying to explore what is good, what is evil. Yeah, you can't have
The Fibonacci sequence maybe would come in where I was saying about reversing it. So, like, whenever you had periods like Tartaria, where they seem to have a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of understanding of frequencies, and were they accessed in a dimension that we currently can't?
Right. I think, okay, so this wasn't the first civilization. This isn't the first civilization. We know that, again, I don't think Tartaria is this place in, Ukraine, and it was this massive empire. I think that was what we call Tartaria is the world's architecture. Right? The previous civilization had it. If we had access to our full faculties, that's how we'd build. We'd be able to build it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, what was the question again?
So the question was, had they? So, like, in the way I asked the question about the Fibonacci sequence, do you get to a certain point and then it goes back on itself? So had they already reached like sort of the infinite possibilities, and then now we've regressed back to three-dimensional?
Right. Well, I think what happens in each dimension, I think we actually do what we know as the hero's journey. Okay. So Adam in the garden, okay, and literally had everything. He had anything he wanted to have happen would happen. All right. So yes, if you wanted a wonderful city, there it was. Yeah. He had access to everything, but he didn't know where he was. Right. Because that's where he was born. He didn't appreciate where he was. Okay. So he had to fall from that position, go in a cycle of falling into the worst place imaginable. Right. And then climbing out of that and getting back to Eden, knowing the place for the first time. Right? I think we are just climbing out of the deepest, darkest depths on that journey right now. And essentially we are Adam, okay? Because, Adam he literally chose the path of extending himself through children rather than being immortal, okay?
When you say that we are God or we are the Most High, you mean that we are parts of the Most High, or we are the Most High?
Well, think of the relationship between Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist. Yeah, Oliver Twist can't say I am Charles Dickens because obviously he's not, but he's part of Charles Dickens. Yeah. A small part of Charles Dickens exploring the world that Charles Dickens created.
I have to be honest. Whenever this conversation started, I thought my mind was going to be doubled in two, but I'm sort of getting it. I think I'm getting it anyway.
It's when you combine last time we spoke, I gave you the end. I gave the end, right? So yes, it's mind bending, but it's so simple that it's mind bending, right? I told you that I realized that my cells, who are me, who have my consciousness, right, in a smaller capacity, they think that I am the Most High, right? Because they're part of this body that they're not aware of directly, but they know there's something that's above them, right? I'm the Most High to my cells, like I'm a cell to the Most High, right? And so on up and so on down infinitely. Yeah, it's all the same thing happening all at once. And looping back on itself at every turn. Yeah, it's amazing. It's wonderful.
So there is no start and there is no end. It's all.
Yes.
It's a loop, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's wonderful when you really get it. It's just wonderful. There is no pain or suffering. Yes, we can experience pain, right? But really, if you think about it, pain is just a faculty of the mind. pain is just there to show you that there's something that needs dealing with. Okay.
And how would
You can cut it
you
off if you want.
teach somebody to start trying to access the fourth dimension, even just?
Again, you access the fourth dimension every time you daydream or imagine something, right? Or create something in your mind. That's you in the fourth dimension. And as I said, you can both read or write to it. All right. So I had an experience where back in the 80s, I wanted to get a two-seater sports car, and nobody was making them at the time. Right, so this was a time of kit cars. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to build my own two-seater sports car. So I designed this car, right, and I even built this 1/5 scale model of this car. Okay, and I knew exactly how it's going to look. I knew everything about it. Then my wife got pregnant, and it became too expensive a hobby. Not my words. Yeah.
No, it doesn't sound like a man's words. No.
So I didn't build my car, right? About 7 years later, I'm walking down the street in New York. I look down and there's my car. It was a Mazda MX-5, right? Literally, it was exactly the design I built, okay? But again, put it in the context of what I've just told you about. When I designed that car in my head, right?
It's now out there.
It is now there's a probability of it appearing in the future. Now, here's
and when I daydream, could I conceivably conceive that because you've put it out there? Is that?
Well, that's where I was going next. Yeah, the difficulty is, was it me who conceived that car, or was it Tom Matano at Mazda, right? And then because it exists in the future, did I see it there? Who knows? Yeah. Because it doesn't matter, because we're all, you know, aspects of the Most High, and it doesn't matter who actually comes up with it. Yeah, as soon as somebody does, it exists. And because I spent time designing it, right? The probability was 8% that I was going to build it, right? Tom Matano put some time into designing that car, and because he worked for Mazda, the probability was a lot higher. Yeah,
maybe the 92% to make it up, you know.
Exactly. So it's absolutely going to appear in the future, and but the difference is he built it, not me, because my probability was low.
That makes sense. Does make sense. And if you were to try and describe what you've described to an NPC, is that even possible, or is that casting your pearls amongst swine?
Well, we all know what would happen if you started talking about these things to an NPC, that you'd get the muggle stare.
Yeah.
It would just wash over, because, as I said, they haven't got that ability to critically analyze what you're saying, to form new ideas. You know,
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Just like, you know, in the video games where we get the term NPC from, you know, they've got a program set of responses, and so that, you know, you might encounter them on your quest, and you'll say, "Hey, am I going the right way?" And he'll say, "I'm too busy to talk to you right now," you know.
Yeah.
And then you might come up 5 minutes later and say, "Is this the right way? I'm too busy to talk to you right now." You know, because that's it. They've only been programmed to respond in one way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these concepts, it's sort of separates the wheat from the chaff, because if it bothers you, well, clearly you just can't conceive it, you know.
Again, I've got no, you know, animosity to the NPCs. At the time, you know, before I understood who they were, yeah, I was getting annoyed and stuff, because they couldn't get what seemed to be obvious to me. But, you know, they're playing their part, you know, just as much as I'm playing my part, you know.
Is this what you're currently doing talking tours on at the moment, or for 2026?
Right now, yeah, it's about the fourth dimension, and how all this works. Because I think it's the most important thing. All this other stuff isn't really important. I think what's happening to us right now, and I think did I mention the Muggle test to you?
On your website?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I mentioned the levels of understanding, right? So we are being the aim of the system, right? The great work, as it were, is to exterminate Adam's children, so that we can't interfere with their plans to essentially destroy this place. The fallen angels hate all of creation. Yeah.
And is that why they're keeping us down? Because our abilities are actually much more than theirs, because we are
Absolutely.
Adam's children.
Absolutely. We've got this, according to the Old Testament, the breath of life was blown into our nostrils. Right? So we've got this ability. They've worked really hard to separate us from that ability, right? So that they can subdue us, right? And put us where we are now, where we're dependent on them and dependent on the way they think, right? And we're stuck in this mode of, this left brain mode of, we're tiny little individuals with no power, and we have to accept, the world as they see it. Yeah.
How on earth do you find a healthy enough balance of left and right? Because it seems like you spend a lot of the time in the right brain, to still interact correctly with the three-dimensional world.
Right. Well, if you remember, I ended up the last talk with, if you don't play the game consciously, the game plays you. Yeah. So yes, you can approach a situation and look at the limitations there and go, oh well, there's nothing I can do about it, and just get blown along by the circumstances, or you can take a hand and use the fourth dimension to kind of get rid of the complexity. Okay, let me give you an example of telepathy, for instance. All right, what telepathy is? Telepathy is. Let me see if I've got something. You got a piece of paper. Hold on a second. So, if you imagine this piece of paper, all right, I have a point. I haven't got a pen here, but I've got a point here, and that's me, and a point here, that's you, yeah? And I draw a line between the two, okay? We're about a few hundred miles apart right now, yeah?
Yeah.
Right now, without the technology, there's no way I can communicate directly to you, right? I could shout as loud as I want, you're not going to hear it, yeah? Right now, we're using the metaphor of technology to bypass that distance, yeah? Let's say 500 miles, okay? Over on this side is a fourth dimension, right? Still the same 2 points, okay? But remember, those points in the fourth dimension are in the same place.
Yeah.
All happening all at once, yeah? So, in the third dimension, which is here, yeah, I can punch through into the fourth dimension and get to you directly.
They've actually done tests with twins and stuff, and they got, for some reason, highly autistic children who can just put messages or receive messages or what somebody's drawn on a piece of paper, etc., without looking at it.
Yes, because what they're doing is they're using the fourth dimension to bypass the rules of the third dimension. Yeah, because time and space doesn't appear in the fourth dimension, right? So we can access the fourth dimension with our mind, okay, punch through into the fourth dimension and directly connect with somebody else. Right?
So it's essentially making life simpler, but more complex in a more complex dimension. It's making our third dimension less complex, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll use the example of the parking space, yeah. You can let the world, decide for you where you park, or you could say, you know what, I want that parking space, and you take a positive, hand in events so that you end up where you need to be, right? The world doesn't have to be difficult, right? And I can give you example after example of times where I've manifested amazing things, utterly amazing things.
So it goes back to the statement you said, you either play this game consciously or be consciously played.
It's not meant to be. This world isn't meant to be this hard. We've accepted it because, we've been trained by their education system. We've been brainwashed by their media. We've been, they've gone to massive lengths to convince us this is the way the world is, right? And they want you to, when you actually accidentally realize that actually the world doesn't work like that, like manifesting a car parking space, yeah?
Yeah.
Because people who do that do it consciously now because they know it works. Well,
And
that
you
goes
just sort of
against,
scale that up.
well, yeah, it goes against the model that they've told us. It goes completely against it. But they say, or anybody else looking will say, well, that's just coincidence, or that was just luck, or they've got all these things to kind of wave all that stuff away.
Yeah.
But literally, that's the reality. And if you just open your mind enough to go, okay, I'm going to accept that this is the reality and I can do these things, well, then you're going to start to actually consciously manifest what you need to have in this world. Yeah. And I believe this is the Great Awakening. This is the Great Awakening that's happened or is happening right now. They've tried to hide it with things like The Secret and all that.
I was about to say, have they used the likes of The Secret as a framework within which to once again like block you off into the three-dimensional world because it's only like you're manifesting. It's not, you don't actually have control over it as such, but you do.
Well, with The Secret, it's telling you an incomplete, it's giving you, again, like anything else, 80% truth, 20% bullshit. Yeah. And the 20% leads you away into, in oblivion, let's put it that way. So for most people, The Secret doesn't work. For most people, these new age practices don't work, right? Yes, 20% of people might get results, but everyone else can just write it off as chance.
Yeah.
Right? If you learn how to do this, it's that you'll know, right? You'll know your intuition that this is actually real. Okay. And now you can take control of your life. Right? You don't have to wait for a coincidental person leaving the car parking space that you want. Right? You can say, I want that one, and you'll get it. I want to be able to do this, and it will happen. For me, I literally designed my life in my 20s and I lived it in my 30s. I didn't know I was doing it, but that's what happened. Yeah. I wanted to be a computer programmer. I no experience, no knowledge, no qualifications, no nothing. Okay. So I applied for a job in British Telecom. Okay. Who at the time were the only ones really doing that sort of thing. And there were two jobs. One was a senior level manager, which I'd had no hope of getting. Yeah, senior level manager. And the next job was a help desk worker. And I thought, well, you know what? If I take the help desk worker job, I can maybe work my way up to being a programmer. Okay. So they were having a job fair at this large building. One side of the building was for the lower level jobs, like the help desk worker. The other side was for the, the senior jobs, right? I went along and I went to the wrong side. Made a mistake, went to the wrong side. The guy said he wanted to see my CV. Now, I'd written a program on a floppy disk. Remember those things?
Yes, I do, yeah.
I've written a program on a floppy disk, and my CV was like, the programmer started, and it was a book, and you can click on the pages, and the pages will turn. And this was 1993, yeah. Pages would turn, and it had my CV on it, yeah. The guy started playing with this, and he was like, when can you start? He didn't even ask me any questions. He said, when can you start? So I started working at BT, and it was 2 weeks into it that I realized I wasn't on the help desk. I got this senior level manager's job. I had no qualifications whatsoever. And everyone else around me were university graduates. Right? And literally I manifested that job. And I could spend all night telling you of all the things that I've manifested without knowing it. And I've always said, "Oh, what a coincidence!" or "How lucky was I?"
There is no coincidence.
No coincidence, no luck. Right? You make your own luck. You make your own circumstances if you take control of your life.
I think that's a perfect place to end it as well, because that is everything. There is no coincidence. There is no luck. Take control of your own life, guys. It's as simple as that. And Dave, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on again. And what I thought was going to blow my mind has actually made it think a wee bit. So thank you very much. And I'll be in touch. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Cool.
Done with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent. You won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.